Hi everyone, this is Sarah from Crafting and Relaxing, and today I wanted to show you a very basic starter card. I think that many times we make videos or we talk about hobbies and we don't really stop to explain that every hobby has entry points and the budget for the hobby can match your hobby. Gardening is a great example. You can get plants from friends, you can go on Craigslist and get free things. You do not have to spend a lot, or you can hit every fancy nursery and buy the hybrid hostas. Some of us might have a little problem with that, but so today I want to show you a starting point, and I can't necessarily make a video that targets everybody because I don't know what you have in your house. Feel free to leave me comments. You know, you can tell me 3 to 5 things that you have to work with and I could use them. But what I'm going to show you today is if I was new and I saw videos like this, what I might want to start with. So the first thing is I have a basic piece of 8.5 by 11 white cardstock here. And it's a nice thick one for a card base. I could have also purchased at Michael's, Joann, Hobby Lobby, just about anywhere. They sell packages that have card bases and envelopes. Those would be a great way to get started. They're usually a little bit more expensive, but a great way to start out and see if you like it. And then you'd have the envelopes too. We can talk about envelopes later. Those packages, anytime you buy anything and you're starting, be sure you get white or cream. I would try and avoid the multicolored packs, that sort of thing, because depending on what you have to work with, it might not work in all those colors. So when you have an 8.5 by 11 cardstock, so I'm assuming you have 8.5 by 11, you could easily have 12 by 12. If you're a scrapbooker or if the store near you doesn't stock 8.5 by 11 as much, you can just get a piece of white cardstock that's 12 by 12 and cut it down too. Either way, before you start your card, if you're making them one by one, sometimes I pre-cut a bunch of stuff and just have them sitting around, but if you're making it one by one, think about how your card will lay out. So in this example, my card is a horizontal design. So this is the exact half of a piece of 8.5 by 11 cardstock. I'm gonna move this for you. So if I had done something tall, like if I was doing a card with the Space Needle on the front, then I might want to consider cutting my cardstock this way so that my fold was right here. So I have a tendency to pre-cut a bunch of bases, and I almost always have cards that fold like this just because I forget and I've been doing it that way for so long. But if I was starting out, I probably would like someone to remind me. So right now I'm just going to take this and cut it in half because I know that I'm going to make something like this. I have a couple stamps set out for today. Now, if I didn't have a paper cutter, I could flip this over, use a ruler, just mark it with a pencil, and I'd cut it at 5.5 inches. An 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, halfway through it is 5.5 inches. So you can see I do have a cutter. You don't have to have a cutter, and you don't have to have a specific cutter. There are a lot of different price points on cutters. This one you can get on sale for like $13 if you get the 40 or the 50% off day. Okay, so there's 5.5. I'm laying it down, I press, and I slide it, and I make sure that my paper is up against this, and I slide it. I'm assuming that this video is targeting beginners, so I'm gonna explain things pretty carefully. Okay, then I'm gonna set that aside, and I'm going to use my scoreboard. I will tell you that I've been a paper crafter for a long time, and I didn't have a scoreboard, and my life did not come to an end. I didn't have a scoreboard or a scoring tool. If you don't, you just take this and you fold it in half, and you kind of loosen it up a little, and then you lay it down flat, just like I'm gonna do with this, and you run. Either you can use a stamp, you can use your fingers, whatever. What might happen is you get a little bit of crinkling around it, And if that's the case, just look at it, and if one side is better than the other when you're done, use that as your card. I'll show you just a second. Okay, so you score it at 4 1/4. So if you're actually measuring, you need to know that. If you're just folding it in half, then you're fine. And this is really thick cardstock, so I'm gonna do it a couple times. Okay, so if I didn't have a scoring tool, what I would do is I would turn these over. I would line up these corners like this. And I'm gonna shove it in the edge, but I wouldn't necessarily, and I would just hold those, and then I would rub this edge with something. Lots of times I just use my fingers like this. And then if one of my edges wasn't quite as nice, I would be sure that whichever one, like this one, I have a little dent from the scoring tool or something, so I'll use this side as my card, okay? Either way, nobody's probably gonna notice except for you. Okay, now, when I'm stamping on a big thick card base like this, I typically like to open it back up. I've made it, I know it'll work, but I want it to be flat so it's not lifting up while I'm working on it. I'm gonna set this finished card aside, and what I wanted to introduce today is just basic. I have stamps, and I am not great at drawing. If you are an artist, if you draw, if you have paints, whatever you have in your house, think of them as an opportunity to make cards with. It could be your children's markers. It could be colored pencils that are lost in a drawer somewhere like mine were. Just think about what do you have in your house and start gathering that stuff together, and then it can become your card making kit. So you can put it in a shoebox, you can put it in a closet, whatever you have to work with. Embroidery floss, all kinds of stuff. So first, I'm gonna take this stamp, and I just wanna make a row of flowers. So one thing I'm gonna do is, when you're stamping, take either a piece of scratch paper or something that's flat. Like this has a ridge right here. I don't wanna stamp on top of that ridge. And I want my flowers to go off the page. And it doesn't matter if I get ink on my glass mat, but it won't dry on my glass mat. And then when I move my project, I'm gonna have ink on it. So I'm gonna take this stamp, ink it up really well. If you have new stamps, or if you're a new stamper, or just if you're wise, it's a really good idea to stamp it off to the side. Be sure you're getting a good image. That's okay. I'm gonna need a little more pressure than I'm using. Okay, and then I'm gonna line it up. These are older style wood block stamps, so it's a little harder to see how you're doing. I'm gonna hold it down for a sec, and then I'm gonna lift it straight up. Okay, I would have liked it to go off the edge of the paper. I kind of missed on that. I wasn't paying attention. Okay, now I'm going to try and line it up so that I have a row of flowers across the front of my card. Now with a clear stamp, that's quite a bit easier. Oh, see that time I had a misstamp right there where I touched it down? I'm gonna leave that because this is for demo. I wanna show you something else too. Okay, so then I'm just gonna keep going across, and quite honestly, by the time I color this whole stamp in, probably nobody's gonna notice that. Okay, so see how my flowers went off the page? That's what I was trying to do over here. So what I've done is I have one stamp that you could easily pick up probably at a thrift store or in the inexpensive bins at Michael's, and I went all the way across the page, gave myself a bunch of variety. In this one, I colored them yellow with a little bit of orange or pink in the centers. If I wanted, I could color every flower on this page a different color. So what I'm doing here is I'm just showing you different ways to bring more interest into the page with just one stamp, okay? Then I also have a thanks so much right here. So we'll stamp it right there. Okay, now, just to make a point, even though I had a little oops right there, I'm gonna color this. I'm gonna show you how it starts to come to life with a little bit of color on it, and I will give it to someone because I don't think that you should, as a new crafter, any new hobby that you're in, if I threw out everything that I made that wasn't fabulous when I painted it, I wouldn't have anything that I painted left. So I'm just gonna show you a couple. These are older Stampin' Up! Pencils. I have them, they've been sitting around, and they're not too bad. They're not too bad. I'm sure they sell some version of these. These are the watercolor ones that you can hit with the blender pen and then it doesn't leave streaks. I tried the blender pen a little bit and it didn't go well. It's really old, so I probably need a new one of those. Okay, so just because you've already seen a yellow example, let's do them with orange and some pink on them. So think about it. If you like to color, when you choose your stamps, be sure that you get open designs. And what I mean by that is, see how the center of this flower is dark and stamped? And when you look at this, it's not open. If you want to color things in, like for this card that I'm making, I would have preferred that the center of that stamp was open. So you want to be sure that you're not buying a solid stamp where everything on it is black, because it's going to put the ink down. Especially if you're a beginner, because then you can buy just a black ink pad and have colored, you could use pencils, crayons, markers, if you have chalks, anything that you have in your house. So I'm just putting some color on this and kind of mixing it up. I don't want the whole exact flower to be the same, and coloring isn't really my thing. And talking and coloring, right? Okay, and then there's a bright pink in here somewhere probably. Oh, I don't know that that's it. Here we go, here's a good pink. So you can kind of see how, with not very many supplies, I have one piece of paper and 2 stamps and a black ink pad. That's all you would need for this. And I'll be sure that on my blog, it lists the supplies very carefully and also the size that you'd cut your paper to and that sort of thing. When I do beginner stuff, I try to remember to lay it out and help people. I'm just adding some yellow because I thought it would be fun, kind of brighten it up a little, and I can always layer it back on with pink. So you'll find the blog at craftingandrelaxing.com, and that has all my social media links too and stuff. Okay, so gives you an idea with the flowers, and I can't find a good, oh, here's an orange. Let's do one. I'm kind of on this card keeping them in the same color family, but not exactly the same colors. I'm going to put some orange on here, and then I'm going to come back around with some pink. So maybe they're all the same type of flower, but you know, things bloom at different times. You get different colors. If you are using colored pencils, you don't have to worry so much about your ink. If you're going to use markers, you want to be sure that you get a permanent ink. And when I purchased, if I was starting out and I was purchasing one black ink pad, I would be sure, it doesn't have to be the Memento one, but I would be sure that it's a fade resistant dye ink and that it says permanent on it somewhere. Quickly dries on most papers, and when stamped impressions are water resistant. So that's important. Okay, so we're coloring those. And then to do the grass, if you have an option where there are different pinks and different greens, grab them all and just use them at a variety. It's going to add more interest to your card. One way that we add interest to our cards when we're not doing a single layer. So this is called a single layer card, obviously, because we're not layering different die cuts and papers and that sort of thing. And the advantage to these is they're easy. They're typically inexpensive because you're not buying a bunch of stuff to lay on it. But when we do a single layer card, sometimes interest is a problem because you don't have a lot going on. So I'm gonna kind of add in my own grass just to get some color back there. So take some liberties with it and make it a little bit like art. I'm gonna take some brown, and right now I'm just doing this one side so that you don't have to watch me color the whole card, but you get an idea of how I would do this. And if I wanted to make a whole bunch of cards and have a lot of variety, and I only had these 2 stamps, I would take them and I could move up my row of flowers and write thanks so much down here on the ground. I could do some that were vertical and stamp one set of flowers and then the thanks so much over it. I could also do, even though the stamp is curved and it's a little tricky, but you can do multiple thanks so much so they kind of loop across. You could tuck them down in closer to your flowers. So think about the multiples versus the one. The other thing you could do with this stamp is you could just ink one flower on it and not have the grass. That's a little more advanced, and we could talk about that another time, but there's a lot that you can do with just 2 stamps even. Okay, so I'm gonna leave that for now and then show you pretty much the same card with one slight variation that doesn't require any expensive supplies or fancy things, but you get the idea there. And I'll color this and be sure that the blog has final pictures of it, okay? So the next thing I want to show you, we're going to pick up right where we were. We have the one piece of cardstock, okay? And on this one, I'll just fold it. This is really thick cardstock, so, but I do want to demo this for you. I'll just show you how I folded them for years and years. Fold it down here. Always line up at the corners, not just one edge. So use a corner so you know it's square. And then just gently work through it. Don't rush it. And see, it does leave a little bit of a ridge. And we just rub that down. And then we look at it and we go, okay, this side's better. And we turn it over. And then I'm going to take another stamp that I have sitting here. There we go. Okay. So just to show you how I fold it. Now on this one, I'm going to do almost the same thing, but I'm going to show you how you could put a cat or a bigger flower or a birdhouse or something else right there, okay? So the first thing you do is you always stamp whatever's in front first. So here I have this cat, and I have stamped the cat on black paper, and this is thin paper. It's printer paper. So the trick to this is you want to use a Post-it is ideal because it has the removable adhesive on the back. In this, I used a piece of printer paper and I put some removable adhesive on the back of it. So a Post-it is really, really perfect. And it doesn't even have to have adhesive all over it. You know how a Post-it just has it part way. You don't want to use any adhesive that's too thick, so avoid using double stick tape if you can, or if you had to, just use a little tiny spot of it, and I'll show you why in a minute. Okay, so we're going to take this cat and we're going to ink it up really nice, and I don't want it to be exactly the same as that one, so I'm going to put the cat right about here, and again, you just stamp down, press, let it sit there for a minute. Let the ink have time to come off onto the paper. Firm pressure, I'm not rocking it. Straight up and straight down is what you want to do. Okay, then I'm going to lift it up. There we go. We've got a cat. Now, this is super fast drying ink. This is dye-based ink. It means it dries very fast. Let me show you. See? Oh, not quite dry. If you purchase a pigment ink, or if you have pigment ink sitting around, you want to be careful because they take longer to dry. Also, Distress oxides would take longer. So what I don't want to do just yet is put this down on it because then I'll smear my image. So just be sure you let that dry. I just moved my whole station so my heat tool's not plugged in. So let me know if the video is horrible or the sound is bad, whatever. Okay. Now what I'm doing is I'm lining that up, not very well, so I'm gonna try again. I'm covering the cat. I don't wanna see any of the cat. And when I cut this mask, I was pretty careful. And I also didn't, I didn't try to trim off the black. Okay, you want to keep the black. The tail on this cat makes it a little trickier too. I'll show you why in a minute. Okay, now we're gonna stamp our flowers and we're gonna stamp right over that mask, okay? You just leave it there and you stamp over it. So let's go, and let's be sure we get it off the side of the page this time. So let's go right about here. The other thing you could do to add more interest if you're trying to make many cards with the same flower stamp is you could move the flowers around on the page. I mean, obviously if I'm doing multiples, they don't have to always be in rows. Okay, there, I've stamped right over my cat. Then I'm gonna go over here. And I'm gonna keep going across the page, just like we did before. And I really should have picked up that paper bag so that I'm just stamping on a flat, hard surface. Okay, there we go. Now you can't tell, right now it looks like a nightmare, right? You can't tell how it's gonna look until you pull off your mask. Okay, there you go. So you can see how it turns out. Now, down here where the tail is, that, like I said, this is a tough stamp to mask with, and that's part of why I chose it to show you. Anything where there's a small space that shows through is going to be harder to mask. And that's part of why you want to use a thin paper too. The thinner the paper, the better. You definitely don't want to make your mask with a nice thick cardstock, because then your other stamp won't get up close to it, okay? Then the other trick is, once you make a mask, keep it. So take your little Post-it mask and stick it onto the back of your stamp. It should be a little bit sticky still, and you should be able to reuse it. And just keep them in your stamp package or wherever, so that if you go to use that, you know you have a mask for it, and you don't have to recut it every time. I don't know why I didn't already have a mask for that, because I made that today. Okay, so here, the same idea, right? It's the same card, but I added some interest, and it would only take 3 stamps. And on this one, I'm gonna put the thanks so much, I think right in the middle. We'll see how it comes out. There we go. So I have, okay, first put the ink pad away. So here we go. We have 3 versions of the same card with just 3 stamps and colored pencils. And only, what we've used here is only 2.5 pieces of paper. So if we had purchased 2 pieces of paper, we could still make 1 more card. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that. And let's see, you know probably how to use colored pencils. So I'll color the rest in, and I'll post the pictures on the blog. And I hope you enjoyed watching. And be sure to subscribe. In the lower right-hand corner, you should see the word subscribe, and you could click that. And if you want to see more videos that are entry-level or starter videos, don't hesitate to leave that in the comments. Okay? Thanks so much for watching, and have a wonderful week.